In any business, there are only two challenges. There are technical challenges where there's already expert knowledge to address the problem. And once you acknowledge that it's a technical challenge, you put that into someone in the team that's got that expert knowledge. There's adaptable challenges, which is no existing expertise of how to solve the problem. That then tends to be a more senior problem to be dealing with. Whatever you're planning on doing, whether it's designing a building or whether you're trying to boost more deals in your pipeline, you should always have a dashboard to monitor that, because what's monitored gets measured and what's measured creates success. For those of you not aware, I'm enrolled and I'm studying business growth at Oxford Uni, split across Oxford and Aston University on the Goldman Sachs Small Business Growth Programs. What that is I applied, it's very competitive and it's only for people that want to scale their businesses. And it's basically like the easiest way to describe it is a condensed MBA, but you're not learning about all these big corporates and their marketing campaigns where they have billions to spend and they're trying to be controversial. It's all about you and your business, and every single thing that you do and learn is for you to grow your own business, and you use your own business as a business case study. I've got to submit my first draft of my business plan next Friday, so I've got a lot of work ahead of me over the next week or so. But I wanted to share, we had a face-to-face residential in Oxford, and I wanted to share some top tips for you. So starting with dashboard, they teach you in the course that whatever you're planning on doing, whether it's designing a building and you're talking about Ben's percentage efficiency, or whether you're trying to boost more deals in your pipeline, you should always have a dashboard to monitor that, because what's monitored gets measured and what's measured creates success. So they're always banging on about whatever you're trying to achieve. You might be, for an example, HMO management landlord, and you're trying to hit certain room rates and certain void rates. Build that dashboard in for yourself so that you have a sheet in front of you to track how you're progressing in certain areas and to quickly monitor areas that are falling by the wayside, but also quickly monitor growth and understand why there's growth and sort of double down in those areas where there is. So a dashboard for your particular KPIs, that might even be P&L, that might even be a balance sheet, that might even be how many deals you got offers out in this month. It's essentially KPIs, key performance indicators, but not necessarily just from an admin and to make sure that you're doing things, but also to feed you information about the business or the task that you're doing at your desk. And I highly recommend that you do that with your team as well. Next is AI. And we had the last talk of the 2 days and I was like almost falling asleep because I was so tired until this guy came on stage and it absolutely blew my mind away. Basically, I asked him what is his top tip for AI at the moment. And he basically said, be really careful around copyright, because a lot of people are making videos with other people's IP, and quite frankly, they can't necessarily do that. He gave us a clear example, which is where someone has made a Muppets video out that's like the Muppets, but in Mad Max. And he sort of said, who owns this? Is it Mad Max and their franchise? Is it the Muppets and their franchise? Is it the person that created it on the AI platform? So just to sort of pre-warn anyone out there, particularly video editing and using AI to video edit, the top tip, this guy who's like top of his game in an AI basically said, make sure you're close to guarding what you're creating, because it might actually be someone else's intellectual property, which would fall into the UK standards of copyright if someone else owns that IP and you're using it. So what that might look in practice is if you go on a video editor platform and you say, here's a video of me, can you snippet some bits of B-roll in between of random people, random sites, drone footage? You don't actually know where they've gathered all of that data and information and video. You could be liable for copyright infringement. And he said there's loads of copyright cases going forward. And it's kind of like the new thing, because everyone freely thinks we're in a world where you can create anything and you don't need to do anything. You don't need to go and shoot it in front of a property. You don't need to film yourself at home. You can create anything out of anything. And he said it's currently sort of finding its place legally, because there's a lot of IP that is owned by people that you shouldn't really be using stuff. And I mean, I'm referring to mostly stuff like, for an example, people have made a video of like Donald Trump riding a donkey. You know, he could sue if he allocated the person that's created that or the person that's owning that and sharing that. There could be a sue case there. So that's the one bit of advice that this guy that specializes in AI gave us. We had a talk about sustainability, and I'm not talking about sustainability as PV panels, air source heat pumps, EPCs improvements, MEES assessments and things like that. I'm talking about your business and how your business operates. And this really did make me think actually specifically more so for our surveying business. So we were fed all of this information of where the world is going. I'm talking about the public sector are hoping for net zero targets by 2050. We're talking about procurement policies in the public sector to procure goods that are actually practicing sustainable activities. And what I mean by that is, let's just assume we're a surveyor and Westminster Council want us to survey their building. If we cannot show our value chain of what we're buying, resourcing, how our team are getting there, and our carbon footprint, we might not get that instruction. So the reason that this is really imperative to think about as a company is in years to come, that is going to be the obvious question that they're going to be asking. Can you share your existing carbon footprint? Can you share how you're actually working towards a better target than most? And it's all about changing your mindset to start thinking about incremental improvements, even if it's 1% a year, to be more efficient, basically being a sustainable business. And that could be something as simple. So for an example, Central Suites is actually a completely paperless company. It was something that we almost anyway, and we decided, you know what, it doesn't make much difference to try and be a completely paperless company. So from all the way through construction, obviously there's documents we have to sign legally, but I'm actually talking about the journey between construction and letting. So all of our tenants, not one of them has ever seen any paper from us at all that they've had to sign, give back, put it in the bin, whatever it may be. And that was something that we consciously tried to do, and it was quite straightforward. And that's an example of making the right steps. Public transport is also working towards those goals, renewable energy in local councils, zero waste target. There's actually a law being brought in, which I was told by a lady on the programme who is in waste, that in April next year, if you have over 10 employees, you have to have 4 bins that are different recycling bins. I think it's glass, plastics, general waste, and then food. So that's coming out by law. So this isn't something that we can ignore and hope it doesn't change. It is changing. Also, they're looking for increased transparency and reporting requirements. And it's really interesting because there's actually a company local to us, which we use. They're a cleaning company. So if we ever have any Airbnbs, we use them. Oxfordshire-based company. All of their vans are electric, and they obviously wash usable items. So they're not one-use items. They wash hand towels, shower mats, and things like that. So quite an economically advanced company. And when I went through this talk, I can actually see how that is a much more sustainable business model than their competitor who isn't even thinking about this. So it's kind of like you need to start, not necessarily change the world and think about other things, but if we go on to the next slide, I've got a task that you could do with your team.
Just wanted to say there's things like B Corp, which is a lot of companies are looking to get involved in that. It's quite a rigorous process to go through, and that covers not just the environmental stuff, but the social governance side of ESG of your business.
Yeah, completely. So if you're thinking, what is Jack on about? I cannot be bothered to think about these incremental changes. I don't like change, whatever you may be thinking. But what I would say, if you've got a fairly sized team, i.e. more than just yourself, this might be a useful exercise that you can do, and actually something that I want to do in our company reviews. It's called a quadrant of the impact effort chart, which sounds way too comprehensive for what your result is. But basically you're analysing, you've got a linear chart. Bottom is low impact, high is high impact. So for an example, relating it to a property for you, if you're putting solar on the roof, that's a high impact change. If you're changing LED lights, that's a high impact change. If you're potentially putting a draft proofing around a door, that's probably a low impact change for heating. That's how you get to your sort of high, low impact. You've got a cross that goes from left to right, which is low effort, high effort. And then you've got your quick wins, you've got your major projects, you've got your fill-ins, and then you've got avoid or delegate at the bottom right. So this is a quick task. What you can do is basically draw it on a table, get post-it notes, say to your team, how can we improve our sustainability on a project, or how can we improve our sustainability in the business? And that might be things that you might not have even thought about. So for an example, LED lights, or actually switching off computers when you leave, and something that you could be conscious of. And there are online calculators that you can use, and I've actually shared 2 links on here. So Planet Mark and SME Climate Hub. And if you just Google like carbon footprint calculator for our business, you can actually do a calculation today, record it, put it on a Google Drive, date it, and then do all these changes and redo it in 6 months. And that is actually something you could use for marketing, for employment. Maybe if you are working in the public sector, to show them that you have actually made incremental changes and tracked that over the years. Because if you improve by 2% or 1% a year, you're improving more than you would have been improving if you didn't do this task. And I actually do see the world moving in that way. I do think we've got a bit of time. Obviously, it's not like EPC's changing and it was threatened 5 years and blah, blah, blah. This is 2050, so we do have time. But if you're not on it now, you really will be falling behind, and everyone else will be progressing way more than you. So use the calculators, have a bit of a think of what you could do. Yeah, this one's cool. I actually really enjoyed this one. So this is a test that you can think to yourself about employees that you're employing. So I've sort of coined this getting the best out of your team matrix. So we have actually found in our company that it's very difficult to get a balance, especially when you're young, hungry, growing, and you feel like everyone's doing a bit of everything. And it's, even though we have our linear roles, everyone's super busy. You've got two axes. So the y-axis, which is bottom to top, which I've been corrected for, is the psychological safety, which is how comfortable someone is to be talked to and challenged and worked through within your business. And then the other axis that we have is drive. Now, what you may find is if they don't feel that they can communicate and open and understand the job role enough, but they have good drive and good work ethic, they go into this anxiety zone where they don't feel comfortable about their knowledge and their abilities to see if they're doing the right thing. That's not really where you want to be. Obviously, if there's low drive and low psychological safety, they're not going to really be performing or driving much value into your business. Now, if we look at if they're high psychologically safe, but they're really comfortable, and I've actually not necessarily felt this in our business, but some days when there's a lot of people in the office, everyone's really happy and jolly, and I actually feel like we're not getting a lot of shit done. So I do tend to knuckle down in those situations, but that's called the comfort zone. And even though everyone's really happy and enjoying themselves, is it driving the best from the business? And fundamentally, that's exactly why you hire in the business. So what I really, really like about this table is you could easily call it getting out the comfort zone, which employees probably won't like, but we call it the learning performance zone or learning zone, where you actually push people to push themselves outside the psychological safety and push the barriers in the business, but also maintaining the high drive. And I think calling it the learning and also having high psychological safety so they feel that they can communicate will prevent them going into burnout, but it also means that you have a high pressure, high performance team without actually acknowledging potentially going into a position where they don't know what they're doing, which is the anxiety zone, or equally into the comfort zone where they're getting, a little bit comfortable and they really like, I'm working at 80% and I work at home on Fridays. Not that we really have anyone in our business of that sense, but it's just a really good way to monitor it. But I think the key thing there is actually calling it the learning zone, which is a really good metric to use, way to communicate to the employees around you. This was a really simple one. We had a talk from, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but anyway, he was recruited in to help the UK government talk about distributing vaccines, and he was lecturing us, American guy. And I was infatuated by his talk, and he was talking about global expansion, but he had two really good things that I took away with me. And he said that in any business you have challenges, and there are only two challenges. They're technical challenges where there's already expert knowledge to address the problem. And he said that once you acknowledge that it's a technical challenge, you can normally put that into someone in the team that's got that expert knowledge or got the time to deliver it. And then he said there's adaptable challenges, which is no existing expertise of how to solve the problem. And that then tends to be a more senior problem to be dealing with. And coincidentally, we've got a question coming on the last slide that I think this really touches on some of the things that will be answered in that question. So hang around for that question. It's interesting that I believe that strategic business owner is most commonly probably focusing a lot more on the adaptive challenges, because a member of the team, unless it's project specific, which then I'd still argue it might be a sort of a technical challenge, you're dealing with things that you might not have dealt with before, and it's how you then go about managing that challenge, outweighing the sort of risk reward or SWOT analysis of it, or what sort of crossroads you're at, and evaluating sort of time, quality and cost. But I found it super interesting to think about a challenge that way, because have you ever been faced with a problem and actually go, I know exactly how to deal with this, or I don't, we need to think creatively, and actually box that in? So he had quite a macro view on everything. And actually the next slide, which is the same, he said the best business owners have the ability to know when to zoom in and out. And when he said it, I was like, that's so obvious, but so true. And I often find that when I'm not zooming out, I'll neglect things and drop, or you don't have full control, or you're not making the best decision. But he said it's in those situations when you're doing the day-to-day, you just take a step back from the day-to-day and zoom out and look at the bigger picture. A common phrase that this might be associated with is working in the business and on the business. But what he's saying is he's actually kind of removed it from that, because if you're a small firm, you might be working in the business and on the business constantly. But what he's saying is in particular decision-making scenarios and in particular sort of crossroads, you need to zoom out and zoom back in. So he's giving you the comfort that you can be in the business, and it's not, oh, I wish I could get out of the business, it's so draining. He's just saying you sometimes need to come out to come back in to make the right decision, which I thought was a really good one and an easy one to take away with.